And so, it begins. The Jet Black and the Starship Crew Collection, Episode 1. The Escape from Culver City. Jet Black was one of those pieces of human wreckage that sought out places where they could disappear and forget who they were. After 10 years' service in the Special Ops of the Colonial Guard, he had achieved distinction. He had been awarded the Star of Penrith and the Badge of Honor. But Jet, he had no honor. He had made the fatal mistake of looking an enemy in the eye, literally and emotionally, and disillusionment had consumed him. He knew the very moment when it happened, down to the exact second. It had been after a particularly brutal battle. When fighting ceased, it was common procedure to check the aftermath. He had been on the battlefield, cleaning up, as the colloquialism went. Though some had another term, looting time. Scattered around him were torn corpses, and he and his buddies were walking through the carnage, occasionally kicking random bodies, just to make sure they were dead, when Jet came upon a mother. From her injuries, she had obviously entered whatever afterlife she had chosen, but beside her was a child. A young girl, still alive. But barely. Robotically, he lifted his weapon to finish the job, but as he did, he glanced at her face. She was looking up at him, pleading with her eyes for mercy or relief. He had no idea of which. All that really mattered was that the child had looked him directly in the eye, and he had looked back. In that moment, he let his guard down, and she peered past the man, and deep into his soul. Jet froze, unable to shut her out, until another soldier beside him muttered a profanity, and ended her misery. Her blood splattered Jet's legs and boots. In that very moment, Jet realized and hated what he had become. In that moment, he faced the fact he had been instrumental in the genocide of a race that simply wanted to be left alone. Jet was court-martialed for refusing further duty. He was stripped of the star and the badge, and dishonorably discharged. Without money, home or future, Culver City was his only option. He stepped onto the rock of Culver City, with a half-full duffel bag over his shoulder that represented all his worldly possessions. He paused and looked around. It was as he had been warned. A god-forsaken piece of rock. Following the other riffraff to the processing building, he was assigned a bunk in a dormitory, along with 30 other men, given a meal, and after the briefest of instruction, with even less on personal safety, set to work as muscle. The unofficial term given to the least qualified and most easily expendable worker. It was at his assigned workplace that several hours later that he was introduced to Culver's union delegates. 3 men, big and very muscled men, approached, walking directly and purposefully towards Jet. Saying nothing, they half-circled him threateningly. Jet gave the biggest one a half-glance and continued working. "Hey newbie," said one. Jet looked at his chest and scanned his tags. He was an electronics supervisor. An indication he had more intelligence, or than his build suggested according to the identification tag. His name was Hubly. Jet nodded. "We just came over to welcome you to the team," the man said affably. "Thanks," Jet replied, waiting. Inevitable follow-up. "It can be confusing, even dangerous in a new place," Hubly said, emphasizing the last word. "New guys are wise to join the union for protection." There was an emphasis on the last word. "Yeah. So they told me at induction." "If you knew, then should have taken up the offer," Jet shrugged. "The deduction is pretty steep." Hubly gave something between a smile and a grimace.
"It's a dangerous place."
"Culver City. Anything can happen. You want to risk not being able to work again. And no compensation. Look, we all make hasty decisions, so maybe you'd like to reconsider." "You want 20% of all my salary? Seriously?" "Okay. Look, You seem to be the kind of guy I could work with, so I'll give you a one-off special discount. 15%. Jet didn't think that sounded like much of a difference. Thanks for the reminder and the offer. I'll think about it, he said dismissively. You'd be wise not to think for too long. The man's smile had gone. Jet didn't like being threatened. He knew he was stirring up trouble. But he knew once he gave in there would be no stopping. If you put it that way, I guess the answer's no. He had barely uttered the word before he felt a searing pain in his kidneys as one of the other thugs drove his clenched fist into the small of his back. Jet fell to his knees, gasping for air. But before he could recover, the two were hauling him up. See, accidents can happen when you are least expecting them, Hubler said as he brought his clenched fist hard into Jet's stomach. It felt like a pile driver had hit him. But this time Jet wasn't allowed to fall as they held him upright. Hubler roughly grabbed Jet's jaw and forced his head back. The cruel smile was back. Now have you had time to rethink about it? Or do you need even more time? People don't like pain, and Jet was no exception. He also knew that that was what bullies relied on. The thought of a whole world of pain was usually enough for most people to back down. But Jet wasn't a person anymore. There wasn't enough pain in the galaxy to make up for what he had become. One way or another he was going to get a beating, so he gritted his teeth and steeled his body ready for the inevitable. As he did, words began to form in his mind. The long-ago words drilled into his mind by one of the combat instructors. There are 3 kinds of fights you'll get into, he had said. Number 1, you can win. If you can, then you fight like hell. Number 2, you are outnumbered. Forget all the heroics. A dead soldier isn't any use to anyone, especially his team. Number 3, your number's up. There's no hope. Do you give up? He had been silent, waiting for any rookie who dared venture a comment. No. There's just a chance you're wrong. Then you do at least expect it, and you go in hard. 3 sounded like good advice, so Jet lunged forward, grasping the arms that were holding him, and kicked himself off the ground, his steel toe cap sinking hard in Hubler's groin. The man immediately folded, and the thug's astonished friends eased their grip. Just enough for Jet to fall backwards, pulling them off balance and into each other. As he began to slip of their holds, he rolled back and spun, gripping one's arm and twisting it up behind the man's back. There was a sickening snap as the thug's shoulder dislocated. The second man was soon recovering from his surprise and lashed out his fist. Jet deflected it and smashed the heel of his hand into the bridge of the man's nose. Blood poured out, and he stumbled back, clutching at his face. Jet reached down and grasped Hubler by the hair, twisting his face up. Thanks for the offer, but as you see, I'm not the kind of person who has a lot of problems with accidents. It was the next day. Jet had his second union encounter. This time there were 7 of them. Things had started to go really bad when, through a blood-red mist and flying fists, he saw Hubler arrive. It was the last thing he was conscious of. Jet groggily woke and slowly became aware he was in a bed, a proper bed, and not a bunk. Crisp white sheets were draped over him, and an odor of disinfectant stung his nostrils. A nurse was hovering close by. You're still alive. Finn's boys generally don't leave evidence. Jet wasn't sure being evidence was a good thing either. The Finn's boys? He asked in curiosity. Now it was her turn to be curious. You haven't heard of Finn? I've just arrived. Obviously you have, she muttered before explaining. They run a protection racket and control pretty much everything else. They were Union? On Culver, it's the same thing. I see. I'm not sure you do. You were lucky someone stopped them. Or, for a moment the nurse fell ominously silent. Look, take my advice.
Get off this place. You seem to have made the worst kind of enemies. Jet didn't want to move any muscle. Never mind, catch the next shuttle off. Thanks for the advice. I'll think about it. If you're the kind of person I think you are, then you should. But if you choose to ignore my advice, you should be aware. Most folks who find themselves on the wrong side of Finn end up down the bottom of a disused mine shaft. I don't want that. The woman smiled. Yeah, but maybe you'll voluntarily jump down a shaft yourself when you get the bill for all the care we have given. She suddenly went quiet as a new voice entered the conversation. The nurse looked nervously at the newcomer and quickly left. Jet couldn't turn his head to see who it was. He didn't need to, as the man came in front of him. Immediately Jet felt himself tense, and the resulting pain made him wince. It was Hughley, and Jet was in no condition to defend himself. Yet there was barely any fear. Instead, a kind of calm came over him. He had heard some say it was how you felt just before death. But Hughley didn't make a threatening move. Instead, he reached for a chair and dragged it noisily over the floor. "It's okay if I sit down?" he said in a very non-threatening voice. "Do I look as if I am in any condition to get off the bed and stop you?" Hughley nodded. He sighed as if embarrassed to speak. "How you feeling then? As good as you look, I'm guessing." Jet tried to smile, as he wondered if there was a conspiracy with the nurse. Or was that what people always said to someone in a hospital bed? "Did I say something funny?" Hughley said, puzzled at Jet's response. "No, you would be right," Jet said cautiously, feeling very vulnerable. "I brought some fruit," Hughley said self-consciously. "It's what people do when they visit someone who's in hospital, isn't it?" Jet had no idea of any proper bedside protocols. Hughley didn't wait for an answer anyway. "Didn't know if you prefer apples or oranges, so I brought both." Jet looked at the man's hands. He had a single piece of fruit in each one. Hughley saw his look. "Yeah, I know. But do you have any idea what fresh stuff costs in the commissary?" "These two cost me almost 3 hours' wages." Jet had no idea why he smiled again, but he did. Or at least tried before the discomfort made him wonder how he was ever going to bite into an apple ever. He wasn't sure Hughley had thought of that, but neither was he going to point it out for him. "I'm told you did well." Hughley had a look of admiration. Still 7-on-1 was never a win situation, whoever it is. "Wasn't that the whole point?" "Yeah, of course. But most people would try and run. You didn't?" "What was the point? Sooner or later they'd have me down some dark corner. So I decided to get it over with." A thought suddenly sent a shiver down Jet's spine. "It is over with, isn't it?" Hughley gave him a reassuring nod. There was a brief silence as if neither man knew what to say. "The nurse said I was lucky?" Jet said at last. "You were. I'm more concerned about having ended up down a shaft." "That too," agreed Hughley. There was another pause until Jet spoke. "Instead, somebody brought me here." Again, there was silence. Jet knew the answer, but he still asked. "I could be dead, wouldn't I? If that person hadn't stopped them." An eternity at the bottom of a mine shaft is a long time. Hughley replied cryptically. "Was that you?"
Hughley didn't give Jet time to pursue the question before he continued.
"Anyway, you think union fees are extortion, Without union insurance, Benedict will have you paying for all this. Hubbley gestured around the room. How I feel at the moment. It's not going to be easy to forgive and forget. Then in that case, you are a dead man. Look fella, let's get down to some home truth. Like I said, this is not kindergarten. Loners don't survive. You have protection or sooner or later you disappear. End of story. Full stop. Dead end. And don't give me shit about being able to look at yourself. You're good. You're very good. I'll give you that. But nobody is unbeatable. Sometime, someplace your guard will be down and you're gone. But Finn and the others know that take out a union member and you get Benedict's attention. He don't mind a bit of rough stuff, but neither does he want killings all over the place. He wants us to know if we follow his rules and be good little boys, everybody is happy. Finn knows Benedict will look away at from a bit of persuasion, but like I said, don't attract Benedict's attention. If he sends in his goons, we're all dead. They have they have firearms, and they don't ask questions. They solve problems the instant judge, jury, and executioner way. No, Benedict likes to keep us all at each other's throats. And while we're squabbling, he keeps control. Do I make myself clear? Look, I'm no good at the smarmy bedside stuff. Get on your feet again, and we'll have a drink and make bygones become bygones. Jet wasn't a miner, but he did know how to organize men. And being quick on the uptake, he soon knew enough of extracting materials to gain the respect of his crew. And his superior, soon, he was a foreman. Jet also had another quality that set him apart from the average roughneck. He wasn't seduced by the drink and the girls. Not that he didn't enjoy both. But unlike most of his peers, he knew when enough was enough. So management began to consider him a reliable worker. And not just day labor. He soon saw that accidents were more than just common, and not just those inflicted by the unions. Most were just down to fatigue and the dangerous conditions. He realized the hospital wasn't all it was supposed to be either. Certainly they treated injuries, but the cost was horrendous, and he encountered many who simply tended wounds best they could, and kept on working. Culver City had a veneer. Below that it was every man for himself. Jet was eating his evening meal in the cafeteria when Hobley entered and saw him. There was a moment's hesitation, and then man walked directly over and put his hand on the back of the opposite chair. He looked at Jet, and Jet nodded in unspoken reply. Hobley pulled the chair across and sat down. "Fish," he said, looking at the meal set out on Jet's plate. "Apparently, they can make anything nowadays? I'm told it's called grunter, from some water world somewhere." Hubley began to laugh. "Is that what they told you?" Jet shrugged. "What's it like?" "Fish. Can never tell with fish. Frozen, hydrated, canned. Don't matter by the time it gets here. It's as good as off already." Jet was starting to lose his appetite. What a lot of places like this need is a reliable, regular supply of good fresh produce. Jet nodded again, barely interested. "It's what I'm going to do when I have enough saved to get off this hunk of rock," Hubley said in an out-of-the-blue way. Jet was not only surprised at the admission, he was intrigued. Barely more than a couple of weeks before the man was beating the shit out of him, and now he opening up about his hopes and aspirations, as if they were old friends. Doing what? Jet had to ask out of pure curiosity. Courier stuff. Courier. Jet almost spat out his food in surprise. Hubley looked at him in an annoyed way. "Why is it everybody thinks that's funny?" "Nothing." "No, there ain't," Hubley said indignantly. "How do you think that fish got here?
swam all the way from that water world. No, somebody brought it and made a fortune without breaking their back. I'm sorry, I just wasn't expecting that. Jet began to wonder if he should push the fish aside and leave. Just 'cause I look like one of Benedict's thugs don't mean I can't have a dream. I'm sorry, Jet said, and he truly was. He was making the mistake of stereotyping that he knew shouldn't be doing. Jet was silent for a moment. Work out the hows and whys of what he saw as the most contradictory man in Culver City. I've been checking on you, said Hubley. By all accounts you're honest, can look after yourself when it's needed. Yeah, well, I know that for a fact. You're smart enough to add 2 and 2 and not get 8 like most in this place. And you are or ambitious. On the downside, you're a bit arrogant and you think you know it all. Thanks for the free character assessment. You're welcome. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you've got the wrong man. I have no ambition beyond what's for breakfast tomorrow morning. Jet, you can see the wrecks all around that this place makes of men. You're better than that. You know this is not where you should be. There was another short silence before Hubley continued. So, what was it, a woman? I came to realize I'd lived my whole life fighting for the wrong reasons. If you want to put it that way, then that's true for half the rest of us, and the other half just won't admit it. But that doesn't anybody the excuse to give up. You didn't spend your whole life physically destroying other people's lives. I don't know what demons you keep buried inside you. But none of us are the people we wanted to be when we were fresh-eyed kids. All the dreams were crushed out of us as life passed us by. But most the people do something about it. Or at least try. I did try. The fact is that it would have been better for a lot of people if I had never been born. Hubley shook his head sadly as he stood. Well, if that's what you really think, then maybe I've got the wrong guy. Well, so long, Jet. Keep clear of accidents. You too. Jet hesitated, realizing that although apparently Hubley knew something about him, Jet knew nothing about the man. It seemed that Hubley read his mind. He stopped and half turned. Charlie, he said. Charlie Hubley. But my friends call me Chubb. 2 months later, Jet was made transport supervisor. He had an office on the asteroid surface where he oversaw a fleet of automated dump drones that brought ore from whatever they were scavenging to the ancient processing plant. It was at this time he first saw the Silver Flyer. Gossip. He knew about Hiram's space yacht, and how it was supposedly acquired from an alien race during one of Hiram's dubious schemes. It was certainly unusual. Every spacecraft Jet had seen looked like something put together from a scrapyard. The Flyer was sleek and glossy, silver, hence the name. While other spaceships' thrusters seemed to grunt and wheeze, the Flyer was effortless. If the talk was to be believed, its technology was revolutionary. Powered by some strange process where light was refracted, or split through a diamond. He wasn't an engineer, so all the detail went over his head. Gossip was that it was Hiram's interest in the gem that had drove the desire to then get his hands on the spaceship. Once he did, he had it converted into a luxury personal transport, while retaining its cargo carrying capacity, apparently, so he could claim it on tax deductions. Whatever the true story, it mesmerized Jet, and only the urgent warning sound that a drone had landed hard brought him back to reality. Time passed, and for the first time since Jet had arrived, that he at last began to feel normal. Or as normal as anyone could be in a place like Culver City. He had climbed the ranks, and now was division manager. For the first time in a long time, he began to think of a future. And one was offered by Hiram. Hiram shook his hand. I've heard good things about you, Mr. Black, very good things. Jet wasn't sure how to reply, so he just smiled. In fact, I'd be willing to say you are potential executive material. Jet had even less of a reply, but the smile faded with surprise. I need men like you in positions where they can use their talents at an advantage. Hiram paused, probably Jet thought for emphasis. It isn't the time and place to discuss detail, but the head of customs and cargo has to attend meetings on some planet. There is a deputy, but I'd like to give you the chance to show your mettle by taking over the position. I stress it isn't long term, just while he's away, but do well and I'm sure something else will come up that could be yours. Jet was flabbergasted. I don't know what to say. He replied meekly. I expect you to say yes, but as I said, it's not the time and the place to discuss it right now. Come to my office at 11 tomorrow and we can go through the detail. But now you will have to excuse me, I have others to meet and duties to do. Hiram shook his hand again and walked away, leaving Jet absolutely stunned. Jet arrived at Hiram's office early, overflowing with quickly researched information on the customs and cargo section. Much he had known was hearsay and rumor, but now he knew that the section was responsible for every movement on and off the asteroid. Mainly it was to do with shipping the individual cargo wherever it was to go. The rest was incoming materials and personnel. He had records on all personnel arrivals. Though considering many didn't reveal their true past, this work simply meant placing them in whichever work area needed extra men. Besides, there was the customs section checking that everything arriving was what was supposed to. Jet could tell Hiram knew everything from the contents of parcels from families to how much and where workers' wages were sent back home. Before you tell me your decision, began Hiram, I need and understand that the pay and privileges you will receive do not come cheaply. Upper-level staff need to be discreet and occasionally act independently outside their official duties. Jet nodded. There was always a catch. I know in many situations there are things that need doing that are best not discussed. So, do you want the job? You're offering me the position, he said in surprise. That's what you are here for, Mr. Black. But I just walked in the door. Yes, and your point. Don't you want to know anything about me? Jet offered Benedict the quickly written resume. Pushed the papers back. I know all I need to know. You're not going to interview? An interview is unnecessary. I'm offering you the position. Then yes, I'll give it a try. Jet tried to sound blasé, but Hiram's reply wasn't what he expected. I don't want you to try, Mr. Light. I expect you to give me your total loyalty. That is what I expect. Jet felt chastised. I'll do whatever you ask me. Hiram's frostiness disappeared as quickly as it had come. Very well, what do you know of Nayat? The sudden change in topic threw Jet, and he wasn't sure how much he did know, or what was false. It's beautiful. Hiram laughed. Indeed it is. But this is business, and in business in general it is, to be honest, load of metal with a very variable part at its center. A diamond. Yes, but not just a diamond, a very special diamond. If I was the kind of man who believed the heart of a star. But we know that's just a superstitious fantasy, don't we? Hiram's voice suddenly changed. Or do we? Wherever it came from and whatever its story or myth, it is a very, very special diamond. One like no other in the cosmos. Jet was mesmerized until Hiram suddenly became more businesslike. In practical terms, it is a very valuable diamond. In fact, the gem itself is worth vastly more than the value of the odd. Hiram went quiet, but his facial expression said all he needed to. Jet wasn't entirely sure what was coming next. Fascinating. What was all he could think of saying? Indeed it is. So Mr. Black, can I trust you to care for the diamond until I want it back? Jet forced back a gasp of disbelief. Me, you want me? Until I want it back. Yes, that's what I just said. Of course I'll do. Jet's mind was in turmoil, but through the confusion, something was trying to make itself heard. And it was clear. I'm not sure I completely understand. I don't see what complicated.
But maybe I have heard the wrong story. But isn't the diamond the power source? Actually, it's more that the power source needs the diamond. Then if it needs it, how is the silver flyer going to power itself? Then the yacht is useless and worth nothing. But he smiled. The yacht is insured. This time Jet understood. He nodded again, realizing he was now going to know the real reason for his sudden promotion. He will have an accident. Yes, and one in which the yacht is totally lost. Hiram smiled. Jet wasn't sure if he was meant to say the words, but he did.
And you get the diamond and the insurance.
No, snapped Hiram. Well, not immediately. I get the insurance, and the diamond goes to a safe place, until the time is right. And that's your job.
It was illegal. Jet was well aware he was crossing the line this time.
He had done lots of things, but never anything criminal. If you are having thoughts of, what is the word, double-crossing me, you need to remember nobody will fence it for you. No, Mr. Benedict, the thought wasn't in my head. No, of course it wasn't. Hiram took Jet's hesitation as agreement. You have an associate, a Mr. Hubley. The question pushed any illegal little thoughts from his mind. Chubb, is that what people call him? Anyway, you spend recreational time with him? Jet nodded. It was true, chalk and cheese as they were, they had struck up a friendship. I am informed he is something of an electronic genius. Jet wasn't sure of that, but Chubb certainly knew a whole lot about mechanical things. Yes, I believe he is. Then it should be no problem for him to change a few settings or make a few alterations. You can sort that out with him. Me? Jet stuttered in surprise. It confounded Jet how Hiram just assumed Chubb, and he would break the law at his whim. He was about to say so, but then remembered Chubb's dream. I would get off this place if I had enough money. Jet realized he was at a pivotal moment, and not just for him. If he turned around now and said no, he would ruin Chubb's chances of the future he dreamed of. At least he owed Chubb the right to do that himself, so he swallowed the protest. You don't expect a man in my position discuss matters with a workman off the shop floor. No, Mr. Black, that's why I employ people to manage her. No, of course. Yes, I will talk to him. Jet expected Chubb to say no, but knew if it whatever needed to be done could be done by anybody. Chubb could probably do it. The thought about Chubb's future got him thinking. He had no future, so money wasn't the motivator, but he could set his friend up for life. He spoke tentatively. So we know what you gain. What do I get? Benedict seemed surprised at Jet's demand. You have the new position. I have the position temporarily. Okay, go on. What do you propose? Insurance companies don't like being cheated. They will throw everything into finding the culprit. And that will be me. Besides, it could be expensive. I may have to pay others. Chubb won't do it for nothing, for example. It has to be worth the risk to us all. Hiram nodded. So, what is your price? Jet had no idea, but it would be a very long prison term. Suddenly, he remembered Hiram's own words. The price of the silver flyer, he blurted out. The flyer? Hiram looked at him shocked and puzzled. You said the flyer useless and worth nothing. You want the diamond. Give me what the flyer is insured for. Hiram looked at him, his face serious. Mr. Black, I seem to have undervalued you. You are correct. The yacht is a triviality. A sly smile came over Hiram's face. Very well, once the yacht is no more, the insurance valuation is yours. Chubb was shaking his head. Jet, you've been set up. You mean I couldn't get the promotion on merit? Replied Jet indignantly. What I'm saying is that you're given a dream job with enough cash to set you up for life. Benedict's got 100 goons who'll do whatever he says without any of that. and boons that can connect straight back to him. But he won't. Jet, no. He will double-cross you. Us. The cash won't be there, and we'll get fingered. Or worse. A diamond is worthless. That one is, it would be just too hot. Nobody will fence it or want to go anywhere near it. But he knows that. Believe me, the diamond is worthless to us. Jet, you've been on the right side of the law. Well, I've known lots of people like Benedict. They weigh the odds, and they don't do anything without closing every loophole. So you have the diamond. It will be hot. It'll just burn a hole in our pockets until we hand it over for a pittance. Jet knew Chubb was right on every count, but he had been in no-win situations before and come out on top. He was sure he would this time too. Jet had been in the new position for 2 days when Hiram came into his office. "How's it going, Mr. Black?" "Great. Taking a little while to master all the detail, but Frank outside is making sure everything is right." "He would," said Hiram. "He's been with me forever." "Mr. Black, I want that little matter we discussed closing tomorrow." "Tomorrow," gasped Jet, "but it's too early." Hiram was adamant. "Early? I don't remember discussing advance notice." "It has to be tomorrow." Jet looked towards the door, making sure it was closed. "Mr. Benedict, I have meetings tomorrow. If I have to take the flyer, it's going to create suspicion." Hiram looked at him puzzled. "I run this organization, and if I decide things change, they change. I have already arranged for you to be transferred to another ship to deliver you somewhere safe. This position gives you the authority to load and unload at will. You will arrange for explosives to be loaded into the cargo bay." Benedict placed a package on Jet's desk. "This is a timer. It is preset to detonate between your departure and the flyer's arrival at its destination." On its way, Jet slowly began to realize how deep he was.
That means somebody will be.
"Mr. Black, I am not asking you to do anything that you have not done innumerable times, and in the process I am paying you a fortune, just so you can go for a luxury ride to a place where you can live in, until we can arrange for you to return my property." Suddenly everything was way out of control. Insurance fraud was one thing, but Hiram continued without a pause. "Hubly modifies the wiring and you both transfer ships, so that you are out of the picture when it explodes." "Explodes? Then what about the diamond?" "It's a diamond, Mr. Black. One of the hardest substances known to man." Jet's brain was slowly catching up. "It will be blown into space and lost." "Yes, but no. The package also contains an aerosol dispenser. It contains a tracer element. You or your Mr. Hubly will give the diamond a liberal spraying so that it can be relocated by a..." He emphasized the words. "Search vessel." Jet was shocked, but he tried not to show it. "The crew." "Not a crew, just one person. The ship is, how can I put this, has a mind of its own." Hiram seemed totally dismissive of the pilot's life and just carried on talking, but Jet interrupted. "That will be murder, Mr. Black." Hiram seemed exasperated. "It is not the first time you have committed that activity." The guilt Jet thought he had begun to conquer flooded back. "I thought we were going to," he said meekly. "I've just said that isn't how I wanted it done. You were a soldier. You have killed many people. What's one more?" He had. But there was a way that he didn't have to anymore. But Hiram seemed anxious. "You don't intend to back out of our agreement, do you?" "No. No, I'll do as you want." "Then tomorrow, Mr. Black. See it is done." Chubb seemed measurably less concerned than Jet had been. He listened, his face serious.
until Jet had finished. "It can't be a complete surprise, Jet," he said. "It's puzzled me for a while what he was up to." Then strangely, Chubb smiled. "At first I thought he was after you," he said.
Jet thought on how Benedict was right. He had killed a lot of people.
Maybe at some time in the past his squad had thwarted some scheme Benedict had, but it seemed over the top to target the tool instead of the organization that had sent him on the mission.
So, what did he say was his plan? Chubb continued. An insurance scam. Chubb shook his head.
"Benedict's got more cash stashed away than he can ever hope to spend. So much that insurance on the flyer is pocket money. Truth up, I doubt he's even that bothered about the diamond. I can't work it out. Jet without the alien technology, the ship's a pile of junk. The diamond is just a diamond. A big diamond I'll give you, but still just a diamond. Nothing makes sense." The same thoughts had crossed Jet's mind. Nothing made sense. Chubb was shaking his head slowly from side to side in a way of complete confusion, when he slowed and fixed his eyes directly into Jet's. A look of understanding came over his face, as he slowly let out a drawn-out, "Oh, of course that's it." Jet looked at him puzzled. At last Chubb spoke in the kind of way that showed he had broken a secret code. "Of course. You know who the pilot is, don't you?"
Jet looked at him curiously. "No?" Chubb seemed to convince himself. "You haven't bought into the gossip?"
"I switch off when any of it starts. Then you won't have worked out his target is Rosie." Jet had heard the name mentioned, or more correctly heard it sniggered. Apparently she was absolutely gorgeous, but coming from the average Culver roughneck that wasn't much of a compliment. Hiram called her his niece, but most of the workers assumed she was one of his toys, and probably that was what Hiram intended. But others said Rosie wasn't that kind of girl, and it was a more complicated relationship. The story ranged wildly, but it seemed Rosie had been the child of one of the concubines Hiram had cast off. Pregnant with Rosie, her mother had returned to some planet and been forgotten by Hiram years ago. As far as he had been concerned, that was the end of it. But if the rumor was to be believed, it seemed Rosie had come looking for her father with DNA proof and enough legal documents to make him nervous. For all his ruthlessness, Hiram was not a fool and realized she had grounds to make some sort of claim. So to keep litigation at a minimum, he had convinced her to join the company where she will quickly work her way up. But jobs for females were almost non-existent. So she had been sent back to college to study business. That gave Hiram breathing space. "Talk is that recently she graduated and returned," said Chubb, taking over Jet's unspoken, half-assembled story. Hiram made her the Silver Flyers pilot. Apparently he told her that attending meetings and forming relationships with the company's contacts would set her up to enter senior management. Chubb's voice had taken on the kind of attitude a dog had when it saw a bone. Maybe she's begun to suspect he was never going to keep his word. He began to speak with a voice of authority. Apparently her lawyers are ready to serve documents." He sighed in satisfaction at his mental gymnastics. "Well done. Anyway, that's the sum of the rumors, and putting two and two together." Jet nodded meekly. At last it did all seem to make sense. Chubb had been right all along. They had been set up. They would never get the money or the diamond. Instead, somehow, they would be blamed with her murder. "We can't go through with it, Chubb," he said determinedly. Chubb nodded. "Neither can we back out now. We know what he's planning. He's not going to let us carry on as if nothing happened. We know his secret, and we're gonna be stuck here on this piece of rock. Trapped, waiting for Hiram to come and get us. Jet looked him pathetically. I'm sorry, and he was. I never intended to drag you into something like this.
Jet felt miserable, but Chub didn't seem disheartened. In fact, he smiled a big wide smile. Jet sat nervously looking at the clock, conscious and strangely reassured by the bulge under his suit jacket.
Suddenly the phone rang, so loud that he inadvertently jumped in the chair. He picked it up. Done, said the voice before the phone went dead. He recognized it as Chubb's. Jet dialed the number Hiram visitors given him. Just calling to let you know, the contract has been closed, Mr. Benedict. Excellent, Mr. Black, and our associate he is on board. He said just as secretively. On board? Yes. He's... is in agreement? Yes. Then bon voyage. Jet stood and walked through to his reception area, and paused in front of Frank. Okay, Mr. Black, Frank replied pleasantly. See you when you get back. Jet walked out of the building. Further down the tunnel, he could see a small group of men casually talking. He turned the direction, towards the spaceport. Barely moments later, he felt a strange prickly feeling in the back of his neck.
Some called it a sixth sense, but you didn't live long, as a soldier as he had been,
Without developing an overactive feeling of suspicion. Looking for every reflective surface, and as casually as he could, he glanced back and saw the men had begun following him. What was the rule, he mused? Yet, number 2. His instincts fully kicked in, and without obviously hurrying he turned a corner before he broke into a sprint. Seconds after they turned too, the first shot ricocheted off the wall close by riveting his sense of self-preservation into overgrowth, and his assumption into confusion, remembering what Chubb had said. Only Benedict's goons have guns?
Another shot splattered him in concreted from the tunnel's roof. It cost time to look back, so he didn't. He began to take evasive action.
It was well chosen, and the only consolation was that they weren't trained soldiers. If they had been, they wouldn't be chasing him. At least one would have stopped and taken proper aim. He would be dead. His mind began to equal the odds. It was time to slow them down. He thrust his hand into his pocket, and his fingers grasped the butt of the pistol. He had scoffed at Chubb when the man had suggested they get some, what he had called protection. So who was the fool now? It was what people called a Saturday night special, an improvised firearm, 3D printed or made of pretty much whatever was to hand. Specials were often heavy, always unrifled, and especially dangerous. Whichever side of the gun you were, but with weapons unavailable to workers, it was the best Chubb's friends could do. It was time to see if he had lost the edge. The movement had to be fluid, but there wasn't much time to go through it mentally. 10 seconds, that was all he could allow. Mark 0. Forward roll. Exit into left knee crouch Mark 4. Right shoulder back. Minimum target, Mark 5. Aim, Mark 7. Mark 8 fire. Right, here goes, he thought. Jet hadn't lost his touch, and the action was smooth, and the aim was true. One of the thugs was down. It wasn't intended as a kill shot, and his aim was a bit off. A flesh wound at best, but enough. Demonstrated as the others threw themselves to the ground. The noise was ear-shattering and the recoil was immense. He remembered even more vividly the lecturer telling how specials killed more users than victims, but it had the desired effect. All he needed was a few more minutes. Mark 13, and he was running again. His only excuse, that he was rapidly becoming out of breath. Rosie looked harshly at Chubb. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "We've got clearance. We need to go." He couldn't explain the explainable, but he just knew they couldn't. "Just a bit longer? What for?" she said angrily. "They said he wasn't coming.
We have no reason to wait. They did. Just Chubb didn't know what it was. Neither have we reason to go. He argued. We're making our own timetable. That's not the point. Control have cleared us to leave. Cargo is secured. And he's decided not to come. And I'm becoming a very impatient person. I go and look. He said because he had nothing else to say. You do that, and... She glanced at the chronograph on the dashboard. I'll give you 5, not an instant more. Then and on whether you are back or not. Chubb was anxiously pacing the pavement, just outside hangar door, when Jet arrived out of breath.
I thought you had bottled out on me, he said sharply.
Jet was too out of breath to answer. Come on. She's going to go without us. Chubb turned and began to run back into the hangar. It was the last thing Jet wanted, but he followed. You were going leave. Flight control said you wouldn't be coming and we were to go.
Jet shook his head as best he could. Had a bit of company I couldn't get.
Jet's words were cut short as shots rang out. Reflexively they both crouched but didn't stop. You didn't have to bring a goodbye party, now why aren't I surprised? Chubb grunted. Seems Hiram
Has changed. His mind. You mean tidying up all the loose ends? Jet followed Chubb across the hangar and immediately wanted to stop. He had seen the starship from a distance, but never so close, and he was dazed. Sleep and stunning lines filled his senses with pleasure. He couldn't imagine how Hiram could even think of destroying such a beautiful thing. Its silver fuselage seemed to shimmer in the heat from idling engines. He was so awed that it took another round of fire, this time from a machine pistol, to make him squeeze the last drop of energy to follow Chubb up the ramp. Chubb was smiling as he entered the flyer and he hit the ramp retract button immediately. He had. Jet was still awed as he followed Chubb onto the flight deck. A young and extremely attractive woman was stood waiting, and she was apparently extremely annoyed. She looked at Chubb, then at Jet. So you're this Jet Black character? Jet smiled weakly. So out of breath it was all he could do. They told me to go without you, so why are you here? Actually, he said, trying to control his breathing. There was no change. Maybe we can get going, and I can explain later. Jet offered the customs clearance papers to her, suddenly becoming aware his hand was shaking. To cover his embarrassment, he pushed the documents into hers. Enter the number into top right. I know what to do, she snapped. What I don't know is what the heck is going on. The communicator buzzed. Silver Flyer, is there a problem? Asked the control tower. Rosie ignored the question. Well, we're here to save your life, Jet blurted out, in the least dramatic way he could. She was obviously angry at the delay, but his response seemed unexpected. What are you talking about? She said slowly. Jet pulled the dictaphone from his pocket and pressed play. Hiram's voice filled the cabin. I don't want it stolen. I want it destroyed. He pressed fast forward. This position gives you the authority to load and unload at will. You will arrange for explosives to be loaded into the cargo bay. Now forward again. This is a timer. It is preset to detonate between your departure and the flyer's arrival at its destination. And yet again. Hubly modifies the wiring and you both transfer ships, so that you are out of the picture when it explodes. Jet saw her expression and pressed pause. There's more. I can play it all, but those guys outside will already be organizing something. Chubb interrupted. Is there? Can I second that? And add that we leave the rest of any explanation to when we are less pressed. Like, way from here. Rosie's anger had been replaced by shock as she looked out of the viewport.
Outside, a group of men were intently watching the ship. Wordlessly, and with a gesture, she engaged the main engine. The men scattered as the flyer's landing gear retracted and the craft began to hover. I don't know what's going on, but for the moment my job is to deliver whatever is in the hold, she said as, without anything being touched, the flyer began to move. They flew straight down the access tunnel as the code was opening the outer doors, and the silver flyer repped off the asteroid, and in moments was weaving through the field of mining debris. It was some time later that Rosie looked at them both. He wanted me dead, she said, with a surprising absence of surprise. All of us, said Jet. Once Job had set the flyer for destruction, it's almost certain both he and I would have been killed somehow. For some reason Benedict tried to bring my demise forward on my way here. Actually, the somehow is that we wouldn't have actually got to the transfer point. In fact, we should already be dead by then. They looked at him in amazement. Being the suspicious kind of guy I am, I checked the timers program. Buried in the software was a proximity override set to detonate while we were still within sight of Culver City, giving everybody the chance. Fireworks show of the century. Sum total, we would have been disposed of, and he don't have to search half the galaxy to find his precious diamond. Jet nodded. Of course that was the final lose end. Chubb smiled. And you know what the sweetest thing is? That Hiram was probably sat in his big executive chair with a tub of popcorn and drink in his hand waiting for the Big Bang. And it was a poof instead. He already knows he lost. Rosie looked at them. I don't know as I totally believe either of you, but I have to admit adding 2 and 2 to my suspicions, it does kind of make sense. When we arrive at our destination, I'll contact the authorities and see what can be done. I hate to disagree, said Jet. But Hiram is the authorities, and he's not a fool. He'll have a plan B, and probably others numbered to halfway through the alphabet. At this moment, he'll be setting one in motion. At least he assumed that. Fact is, he's played his card in this game. Everything has to begin anew. We know he wants right of us all, even more, so we can expect no help or second chance from anywhere, and anybody.
I think I can help you there, Jet, grinned Chubb.
When I discovered the double cross, I had a quick rummage through the rest of the cargo, in case there was a backup bomb. Their attention was suddenly raised. Relax, there wasn't. But what there was, a couple of crates of ore samples. Rosie interrupted. Gold ore. It's never mentioned as precious metals in case it gets out to space pirates, but it's on the manifest, and it's almost pure. Her words faded as she made her own mind up to what Chubb meant. Wait a minute, you guys are not going to. She backed off towards the cabinet. No, we're not pirates, Jet said indignantly in his own defense. He pulled out the pistol. In response, she pulled open the door, revealing a stash of weapons. Chubb immediately raised his hands. Jet flicked the gun over to hold it by the barrel. Here, take it. I don't have anything else, but your scanners will have confirmed that. Rosie made a peculiar sweep with her hand and glanced at a bank of lights as one changed color. Toss it over there. She indicated the side bulkhead as she pulled out a particularly mean-looking weapon. And yes, they have. So that's it, you're after the gold. Chubb spoke softly in an attempt to ease the tension. Does the documentation say anything about the gold being radioactive? She looked at him curiously. I broke a crate open. You know the funny thing about greed, it has this habit of biting the hand that feeds it. With all his wealth he had to cut his losses. Can I get something from my bag? Be my guest, she said, pointing her gun at him.
He saw her finger tighten on the trigger as he pulled out the aerosol can.
Relax. It's not pepper gas. It's a tracer. The gold is lathered in the stuff so that he can locate it drifting around in space, after we have been vaporized.
Chet grunted. Gold. I was wondering what story he'd concoct to explain why we ran off with the flyer. You're forgetting the diamond jet. Whatever, he stitched us up pretty tight. If the plan runs through, we're innocent victims. If it doesn't, no one will believe that we're not just common anywhere.
His influence stretches Chubb, and I will end up dead or incarcerated. He looked at Rosie.
And you will just disappear.
Chubb grinned.
Yeah, that's how it goes. But corruption expects corruption. He looked at Jet. You're a degenerate, unscrupulous killer.
Hang on, Jet said defensively.
And me, well, apparently I'm just a thief. That's an insult that I don't care for. Okay, like I'm not saying if something isn't tied down. But that doesn't mean I don't know right from wrong.
When you pair have finished polishing your halos, you think I'm going to let Hiram get away with trying to kill me?
What?
Now is not the time for revenge, or clearing our names. We are powerless and helpless right now.
But I'm certain ours and his lives are going to cross again. And then?
Rosie put the weapon back on its shelf. At one time I actually thought he was. She sighed. So what now?
Jet smiled. Well, Chubb has always had this dream.
He smiled as he looked at the man, and given time I have kind of come to think maybe it's not a bad idea.
Chubb's smile morphed into a wide grin. We have the means and we have the capital. I think
Benedict owes us them at least, and after all, like it or not, we're already labeled criminals. So, we go into business.
He looked at Rosie. From what I hear, you are a next-level pilot, and you already know the ship. The three of us as the Silver Flyer Express. Unless you have other plans?
She said nothing, but waited for Jet to continue until Chubb did. The stolen express courier service. At your service. Rosie looked at them in total disbelief. Couriers, are you kidding me?
You got a better idea. Her expression of disbelief eased. We're going to have to work on the name?
Jet whipped out of the viewport. Then, that's our new future. Our home is out there. Our home is among the stars.
Catch the thrill in Marooned on the Ice Planet, the second chapter of Jet Black and the Starship Crew series by Starship Writer. Jet and his crew must brave the chilling blockade set by Benedict's militia on the peaceful planet of Kiriligientiaz. The stakes are high. The alien race is on the brink of extinction, starved and freezing. Only Jet's crew can break through with essential supplies. Yet the mystical diamond beckons Benedict. Will he seize this chance? Stay tuned for this gripping saga.